Anthony with the pump fake and one dribble inside to the long two, and he makes it. That's been his game his whole career. But look at him smiling. We go, my bad. The long two.
Welcome to another episode of The Long Two. I am Pete Rogers. He is Natty Wallach. And we are a Carmelo Stanthony podcast and occasionally talk fantasy basketball. Natty, how you doing today?
I'm all right, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. We are going to obviously talk about some fantasy hoops for the first time in a long time. But we are, 4 games? This tells you how invested I am into the NBA Finals that I don't even know what game is being played tonight. Is it game 4 tonight?
Game 4 is tonight. Yes,
Game
we're
4
just
is
a couple
tonight.
hours away, and Bam Adebayo looks like he might play.
So we're recording this Tuesday night, and that has been kind of a letdown of this final so far. We talked a bunch. We did our finals preview on last week's show, and we talked a lot about kind of like the matchups and exciting things that could happen in this finals, and we haven't seen a lot of it because Goran Dragic got injured in the very first game and is out for seems like most of the series. And Bam got injured too, and now is just coming back. So it's been outside of Jimmy Buckets just deciding that, he's going to drop 40 and will the Heat to a win. It hasn't been like uber competitive.
The games, there was just a bad taste in your mouth sort of from game 1 on. Game 2 afterwards, everyone was just saying, well, the Lakers are just huge, and this is the kind of team that LeBron wanted, all defense, and their shots were falling when they needed them to, and yada, yada, yada. And then Jimmy Butler exposed, I don't think a team weakness, but sort of a mental weakness. I was sort of surprised. I was almost aghast, actually, that LeBron...
Aghast, you say?
Because this is
you didn't like my pointing out of your fantastic vocabulary?
Well, because the whole time while I was watching it happen, I was like, the one thing that people really didn't talk about for the finals preview is what happens if LeBron loses. And if the Lakers lose to an undermanned Heat squad, that's a catastrophe.
That would put a large blemish on the old LeBron legacy that we all care so much about.
And who knows what the real world ramifications would be? Like, would Anthony Davis be like, actually, after seeing some of the offseason moves, I don't really know if I need to stick around here. Like, I'll get my money no matter what. There's like, that is a worst case scenario. I also don't think it's going to happen. But that's why I was aghast, was because I couldn't believe LeBron was like letting this team, like, they should have put their foot on the Heat's neck. They should have been
it should have been game, set, match.
Honestly, I would be up all night if I had been LeBron. Just like, I can't fucking believe we let that. Jimmy Butler played like a superstar, fact. Yep. And the Heat changed how they play. They put 4 shooters around a non-shooter, which, FYI, everyone in the league, if you really want Russell Westbrook to be effective, that's what you should do. And Kelly Olynyk, shooting 40% from 3. Everybody played hard. The Lakers just had a lot of turnovers. None of their shooters shot very well. I mean, did Danny Green sink a field goal? I don't think he did. And all the bad stuff that we had talked about in the finals preview, where like if people aren't hitting their shots, that happened to the Lakers, but combined with the fact that they just played with lethargy and not a lot of passion. Like Anthony Davis, what did he get? 5 boards? Is that it?
Yeah.
He had foul trouble, but like, come on. I think it was Riley who said that you have to win with if you don't rebound, you're not going to win. And I mean, Rondo had 8 boards in game 3, which is hysterical. And I'm pretty sure that was second on the Lakers. So while the game has changed in a lot of ways, it's come down to it's come down to the thing that finals always seem to come down to, which is who are the stars? Are they playing well? And who's getting second chance buckets,
Yeah.
like, because it's not like the Heat's, I mean, both Hero and Duncan Robinson are shooting under 30% for the finals, I think, from three,
Which is,
they haven't looked.
Right. We talked about that as just like, that is a worst case scenario for the Heat. Like you need, especially in this, we didn't even talk about these things when we knew Bam was going to miss significant time and Goran Dragic was going to be out for the most of the entire series. Like we were saying that like there is very little way the Heat seems like they're going to win this series if suddenly Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero just get cold. And what do you know? They haven't quite been their Boston Celtics killer selves. I mean, Duncan Robinson wasn't actually even great during the Celtics, so
yeah, true. He remains a source of gravity, though. Like people don't want to just leave him open.
Yes.
But I sort of am wondering whether, like, if you gave Spoelstra a choice, you get Dragic back 100% or you get Bam back 100%, who he would choose in this series. Because I kind of feel like, even though AD didn't play well in game 3, like, is he going to get shut down with Bam playing?
Right. It's almost as if, like, do you want to go Dragic, if you were to pick one to come back, Dragic, so that you kind of have to make the Lakers play a small ball, as opposed to if you're playing with Bam, Bam's got to be on the court, obviously. And he should, he is fantastic. And so, but then the emphasis now falls back on this kind of like big ball bullying. And unfortunately for the Heat, the Lakers are always going to have the advantage in that category because they have the best big man in the league right now.
And, like the Heat didn't do as much zone or maybe any at all. They changed things in game 3 for sure. It felt like a completely different game. And, I wonder if Bam coming back maybe clogs things a bit for Jimmy. Like the question is whether, like, if you took Dragic over Bam, that would mean that you always had either Dragic or Jimmy out there, to drive the offense, which takes a lot of stress off some of the other dudes. Like Tyler Hero he hasn't just been playing above what we thought he was. He's had to, like the Heat aren't here without him playing above his level. And I don't know, if you put Bam back out there, is he really going to, is he going to get hurt right away again if you put him up against Dwight Howard and Kuzma and AD? Yeah. Like if you take him off the bench and he doesn't have to go against as many of the big guys, maybe that's better. But it also seemed like Olynyk opened things up, like he
Kelly O, man. Kelly O.
Yeah, like all these, shooting centers that Boston has had over the years seem like they're actually pretty effective guys, especially in a finals where it seems like perimeter players are grabbing more of the rebounds than ever before. Right. So, I still feel like the Lakers are going to win the series, don't you?
It would be pretty shocking to me if the Lakers did not win the series. And I think obviously we'll know a lot more once, game 4 happens. Like all this speculation could be for not when, the Lakers come out and just wallop the Heat in game 4 and it's a 3-1 series. And you're like, all right, the Heat played their best card in game 3 and, they're now done.
Like if Bam comes back and he's awesome, just,
but Bam's got to be like otherworldly, don't you think?
Sure. Totally. Just like Jimmy was in game 3. Like that, but that's what you need. Right. Just like Tyler Hero, you need star nights from all of these dudes. It would be nice. It would be really nice if Duncan Robinson sunk some of those shots.
Just suddenly becomes unconscious from downtown.
But, I can also see a world where Bam comes back and 80% of Bam is enough to counter enough of the bigs so that some of the other players on the Heat do better. I can see that happening, but the Lakers are so fucking physical. I feel like they're just going to beat the shit out of them. So I don't know. I still sort of feel like the Lakers should not lose another game. even if Bam plays.
I would agree to that. Well, since the NBA finals seem pretty wrapped up, who knows? Could be a 2-2 series by the time you guys are listening to this, and you'd be like, wrapped up? You guys are idiots. It's a tie season.
And that would be great. That's what I'm hoping for.
Great.
I would love to see another awesome Heat game.
We want
because
more
that's
basketball.
crazy. Oh, yeah.
But we're going to look to the 2021 fantasy season and start getting prepared for it, because it has been forever, Natty, since it feels like we have had actual, roto fantasy relevant basketball being played, because unless you played DFS, you weren't really playing during the bubble. So we're going to talk about some guys who used the bubble to their fullest advantage and really boosted their 2021 value in the bubble. And I'll start us off talking about, and this is not going to shock anyone. I don't feel like any of these names we're going to talk about are really going to shock anyone, but we'll talk about Tyler Hero, because he seems like the poster boy for this. On the season, he was playing, 27 minutes per game, 13 points per game, 41% from the field, 39 from three, 4 rebounds, 2 assists per game. Now, his numbers in the bubble didn't explode. 28 minutes, 17.3 points per game, 50% shooting. So that's a big uptick. That was really nice to see. 37% from three, 4.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists per game. But what you saw from him was the fact you saw that scoring increase, and that scoring increase came from him being able to take over games. And I think as a fantasy owner or fantasy manager, that's the thing that I love to see from someone who I'm going to be taking early in a draft or entrusting with kind of my stalwart at a position on my fantasy team. If I'm trusting Tyler Hero to be my stalwart at the 2 guard, I want a guy who I know could go off for 30 and, shoot whatever, 40% from 3 and grab 6 boards and dish out 5 assists. That game is in Tyler Hero. We saw it both in the bubble and obviously through the playoffs. He was money against the Celtics. So I think he's the guy. He was, if you look at ESPN's player rater, 204 is where he finished the season, which is a stark contrast to what the numbers he was putting up in the bubble and in the playoffs. So I think he's certainly a guy going into 2021 who put his name on the national stage and is going to no longer, he's completely left that realm maybe of a potential sleeper and to a guy who's hey, a must target guy. He's going to be a guy who's going to get targeted in every single league, and you're going to have to pay for him early. And you should be, because I think he's going to be really good. And he's only going to get better as the Heat continue to put more and more responsibility on his plate.
He was overshadowed during the regular season by Duncan Go Blue Robinson. Duncan ended up in the top 80, I believe, in fantasy value. I mean, right around the top 75, depending on your league. But their roles or their values have flipped in the bubble and the playoffs, especially recently. Duncan's just, his shot's gone right now, or he's just being really unlucky.
Yeah.
Tyler Hero had that huge game, which is what changed everybody's mind about him. But I think sort of the most important thing that I've seen from him is the passing. The assists, I think, are what please me the most, because the odds of Tyler Hero being a 27 points per game player next year are, not nil, but close to it. 15 to 20 points, I think, per game is what you're hoping for. Maybe 23 if everything goes right, but that will also diminish some of the other players' roles. The more Tyler Hero goes up, I think the more Duncan Robinson will go down, if that makes sense.
Totally.
But
and the thing,
it's the ball handling and the dimes. I think that's we know he can shoot. We know he and Duncan Robinson can shoot. The boards are nice too, but it's the fact that Hero is making those passes in the playoffs, when defense is at its height and that's occurring. So I'm with you. I think 5 dimes per game next year should be, maybe the floor for expectations for assists.
The thing I also really like, and this is, I like that you pointed this out, is that Duncan Robinson, he is cold from downtown, right? He, during the season, had 9.4 free field goals, 8.3 3-point attempts. So like
Yeah.
Duncan Robinson, you are buying on he can shoot the three at lights out level, but if he gets cold, he doesn't have another way to score, right? He's not driving, he's not scoring in the paint.
He's not being asked to also, like
Also,
maybe
that's
he
true.
can do those things, but it's like he knows
That's
his
not
job.
his role
That's
right now.
one,
Right.
Totally.
Whereas Tyler Hero in the bubble, 17 points per game, 50% from the field goal during the season, 11 field goal attempts per game, 5 threes per game. So like, I love the fact that Tyler Hero can score in a multitude of ways while getting you those assists, those boards that we talked about, and his role being increasing. I just feel like he's shown to have a very stable and high floor, which I love going forward.
For sure. And depending on how the Heat want to develop their team, maybe he's the secondary ball handler. Like there's so much we don't know going into next season, obviously. But he looks fantastic. The shots aren't falling. But again, this is going up against, what should be the best defense, like the Celtics. That's
right.
That's a tough assignment no matter what, no matter who you are, especially when you have a 7-game series to scheme for. And so I'm not holding their cold shooting against them so much. And I don't think the nation is either. Like everyone's just sort of like, yeah, it's tough scoring against these guys. But like Danny Green and the Lakers, quote unquote shooters, that's more like they're old, they're injured, they're not getting it done. Like I don't think blame is the word, but we're counting it more against them than I think we are against Hero and Robinson.
Totally. And it's an age thing, like you said. And it's also like Danny Green was brought in for that express purpose.
Totally. I mean? Hero and Robinson haven't been here before. Danny Green's been to how many finals?
Right. And Danny Green is like, you are on the Lakers to play defense and shoot threes. And if you can't shoot threes, then it's like, what are we doing here?
He's injured. I mean, I think he's mentioned that he's like nicked up and bruised, but I sort of feel like it's more than, I mean, his numbers in the playoffs just are not good. But that's sort of the name of the game with all of the guard, like all of the perimeter players that aren't wings are sort of having up and down games. That's one of the reasons why I think the loss of Dragic is so rough for the Heat, because if he could have been a consistent guard, driving in, it would have just changed the whole series, or maybe just made the games a little bit more enjoyable. They have been not boring, but like
predictable.
Yeah. Like game 3, I did think that the Lakers were going to end up winning through 3 quarters, but then it just sort of became apparent, like, oh no, this is the Heat's game. The Lakers don't care.
All right. Who's you got? Who's a guy that you are that you think really helped his 2021 value in the bubble?
Well, as you said, this was tough because a bunch of these guys are already in the top 100 or top 125. I mean, Hero is a top 125 pick for sure, and he didn't end up in the top 125. Excuse me. I'm going to go back a few rounds to Donovan Mitchell. Mitch.
Oh my goodness.
Like, remember those motherfucking early rounds where and let's just talk about Jamal Murray too. It's those two. Both of those guys were just top 75. Because like their stories of the playoffs were against each other. Yeah. They looked so sensational. Just so they looked like they could carry teams when everybody else is cold. They looked like they could score 40 or 50 points when they needed to. Yep. They looked like young versions of Dame is what I thought when I wanted to talk about this. Because
Jamal Murray especially, man. Good God.
Dude, because like they had to change their shots too. Sometimes they're these step backs when they're in the paint and it just doesn't seem like they could possibly get anything done. And then this high ass jump shot that just arcs over everybody, or just getting contact. I mean, they just played both so beautifully, especially because some of their players or some of their teammates in some of those games just didn't show up, and they willed teams to wins. So I think both of those players are going to be top 50 in the next draft. And I mean, top 25 maybe at the end of the season if everything goes right.
Don Mitch especially. Jamal Murray, I do really like. My only worry with him is the fact that like whether is how streaky of a shooter he can be. But the Don Mitch is like the Jazz figured out how to unlock Donovan Mitchell, and it's, hey, guess what? You make him your primary ball handler and scorer without Bojan Bogdanovic, and suddenly now he's everything that you've wanted him to be to lead this offense. And so that to me is like the clearest path of Don Mitch ascending to superstardom, both in the NBA and from a fantasy standpoint. So I totally agree with you and him. I think Donovan Mitchell locked himself entirely for being a top 25 pick in 2021.
I also feel like with Don Mitch, like I feel like Utah could do so much over the offseason because I think that everyone except Donovan Mitchell is absolutely expendable. Now that you have seen what he can do, like you can send Mike Conley away and get something else. Maybe you don't need to re-sign Gobert. Like Bojan, do you care if he's there or not? Joe Ingles is another year older. There are just so many moves I could see the Jazz making to try to get a little bit stronger, a little bit younger, a little bit faster, and maybe more on the page with a very young and spectacular looking Donovan Mitchell. I don't like Karis LeVert and him maybe doesn't work too well because LeVert sort of seems to need the ball a lot. Like I'm not really sure who would
Karis
actually
LeVert also
fit
belongs
with him.
on this. We're not going to talk about it, but Karis LeVert also did work this bubble to get his fantasy value up.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets had no other choice. Like everybody, that was such a man. It should have been the Bulls, or it should have been the Suns.
It should have been the goddamn Suns.
Yeah, it's so terrible. Yeah,
a travesty at the highest order.
A wasted series. Really, you could have had better ratings. Because not even Nets fans were like, oh yeah, we could pull it out. Like, right. Yeah, come on.
And that fan, yeah. Anyway, we spent plenty of time on this show talking about it, so we don't need to spend more.
Sure, totally. All I'm saying is that I think Donovan Mitchell is going to go higher in drafts next year than Jamal Murray because I think that Utah should be aggressive and the Jazz might be a very different looking team.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree and endorse that message.
Like, what if it's something crazy like Harden?
Oh my goodness. Natty.
Like something nuts could happen, Something nuts will happen. Big names change teams all the time. Yeah.
But do we want that? Honest question. Like, would Harden? Do we want someone to come in and rival Don Mitch for ball and touches, or are we like, nah, that's totally perfect because Don Mitch can get his and Harden can get his, and I'm not worried.
I think people fall in love with potential. So while that certainly wouldn't be not my number one choice, like my number one choice would be what's up with Danilo Gallinari, what's up with Blake Griffin,
sure.
Yep. Like what's up with these sort of maybe undervalued assets who are, maybe a little bit older, but like having a point forward does help Don Mitch, I think. Like that's why Joe Ingles and he sort of work together. But I think he can just do better than Ingles. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of options out there. Like if you're Donovan Mitchell, would you want Julius Randle on your team?
I'm actually a low-key big Julius Randle fan.
I think he's an effective player for what you ask him to do. Like Domantas Sabonis.
Don't hate
something. Whatever.
The Pacers seems like they are on a full rebuild. But
if the fucking Jazz get Victor Oladipo, I'm in love with that team.
God.
I'm in love.
You would explode with happiness.
Team. Holy fucking shit. Or how about something like, would you like CP3 with Don Mitch?
I don't hate that.
Then plus CP3 is a Jazz player again, which would be funny.
Which would be funny. And CP3 then gets to indoctrinate Don Mitch in all of the best practices for flopping and et cetera.
Like, I just sort of feel that Donovan Mitchell's postseason and bubble sort of showed that he can play with a bunch of different types of players. And even when you lose a weapon like Boyan, which we thought was
Right.
going to be devastating, he can
Totally.
rise to the occasion. I was so impressed.
Yeah. Nope. He certainly belongs to be here and will 100% deserve all of the fantasy accolades that he has earned himself and will garner in the 2021 season. So actually, you talked about Jamal Murray. One of the guys who I think also really stood out and made a name for himself on the Nuggets, not Jamal Murray, but Ruddy made Michael Porter Jr., who had a negative player rating for 2020, which you just love to see. A true Cinderella story there. Even though I don't want to heap too much praise on Michael Porter Jr., since maybe we should learn that vaccines are actually pretty good. But what am I saying?
Hey, Kyrie doesn't believe in,
the fact that Kyrie is already like dismantling Steve Nash before they've even had a practice brings so much joy to my life.
Like, that makes me think that he and Durant like actually didn't okay it. Like, I have no idea what's going on with that. That is so. It might just be Kyrie being chaos, grim dark master. Like, I.
All right, so I
putting
want
my foot down.
we're on this subject, and I want to quickly just say it. I would like to officially retire the nickname Joker for Nikola Jokic, because on his Basketball Reference page, one of his nicknames is Big Honey, which is just such a better name for him.
Yuck.
So much better, so much more applicable.
And
everything about it works for Jokic so much better. And Kyrie,
sweet and slow.
Oh my God, it's perfect. Kyrie deserves the nickname Joker, because that man lives for chaos. I mean, the great Michael Caine quote, "Some men just want to watch the world burn." That's my British accent for you.
Nice.
Like, that is Kyrie to a T, man. The guy just wants to watch the NBA burn, and like loves and basks in the warmth of the flame that he sets off. I mean, good Lord, Steve Nash hasn't even shown up. I mean, it would be hilarious. It will be hilarious if you're right, that if KD and Kyrie didn't actually have a say, and the Brooklyn Brass just decided that Steve Nash was the way to go, and Kyrie and KD just like bully him out of there. And the thing is, I don't think it's going to be KD, because KD, I think, likes Steve Nash. I mean, Steve Nash seems like
they definitely like, yeah.
So I don't really know. So, but like, it just feels so Kyrie that this is already happening. And man, it just fills me with so much happiness.
Devil's advocate as a Brooklynite, I could see
you are fucked. Accept it.
Oh, and I'm a Pistons fan. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry.
It's fine.
Yeah. It could have been that all of this is fine and we just misunderstand. Like, Kyrie and Steve Nash could have had a conversation where it's sort of, they spoke about how it's going to be a dynamic conversation between 2 point guards, one the coach, one the player, as to how the philosophy and scheme of the team operates, which would make sense. Of course that makes sense. 2 point guards talking to each other, like, it would be weird if that didn't occur. So when Kyrie's saying, like, we're all coaches or whatever the hell, it could have just been
It could be some like crazy new age shit that he and
no, just the same thing as with Kobe and Michael with Phil. Like, we talk, like, the teams are constructed around how we feel about how the team should be constructed. Like, you're not telling me what to do, and I'm not telling you how to run the team. We together are constructing this team. And I feel like that's fair. I mean, the thing about Kyrie is that if you take away that one shot, which is one of the well, he still has numbers, but he just doesn't have a defining, like, oh, well, that's why he ends up in the Hall of Fame. He's not a Hall of Famer yet, I don't think,
right.
but that would be in the first paragraph if he does. But like, I don't want to hate too much. Also, whatever. Brooklyn's going to be one of those teams that makes a lot of moves too. Although the funniest thing that could possibly happen is if they don't make any at all, and people are like, "Yeah, LeVert's kind of ball hoggy, and like Spence doesn't really want to leave, and Jared, he's cool, but we don't really need him," and blah blah blah. That would be very Nets.
That would be It would be rather incredible, and I am 1 trillion billion% here for it. Anyways, let's get back to Michael Porter Jr.
Right.
Tangents occur in this show. What can I say?
The guy that the Knicks wanted Kevin Knox to be. Right.
Yeah,
Michael
exactly.
Porter Jr.
Exactly. The guy who the Knicks are going to
resist.
then trade picks for CP3.
That rumor is amazing.
I love
just
it.
Like whatever. But that's CP3 might be on the move. Although if I'm him, I'm kind of like, we had something.
Yeah.
But whatever.
CP3. I don't know if CP3 wants out of OKC. We'll see.
That's another team with a lot of things to decide. Yeah. So, but
do you want to talk Michael Porter Jr.?
This is the question I had. Do you think he goes in the top 50?
It's a good question. I could see it. So just for numbers, 14 minutes per game. This is during the season. 7.5 points per game, 49% shooting, 41 rebounds. 4.1 rebounds.
That would be nice.
That would be nice. I wouldn't complain if he had 41 rebounds per game.
10 rebounds a quarter. Cool.
0.7 assists, 0.8 steals, stocks per game. And then in the bubble, obviously we saw him like fully blossom. 33 minutes per game, 22 points, 55% shooting, 8.6 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 2 stocks. Explosive part of their offense. Finally healthy.
Dude got banged around and got back up. I think survived. Some of those injury concerns we can sort of put those a little bit in the past.
He locked himself into a reliable starting minutes, I think, for 2021.
He demanded the Nuggets change. He complained about we're just not doing enough to score. That was incredible. Good for him.
So good for yes. So if you look at players who finish in ESPN's top 50 player rater, there are some names there that I think he certainly would be drafted over. Now that being said, I don't take ESPN's player rater as their top. You don't take that as the top 50 players. But Dennis Schroeder,
right?
It's 50 overall. I take Michael Porter Jr. over Dennis Schroeder in a heartbeat.
Sure.
So I think he could be. I think he would. That's a good over under because that feels like the number where he's kind of flirting with it. And if I look at, so I'm looking right now, Fantasy Pros expert rankings around 50. You've got, so this is from 40. We'll go from 45 to 55.
Okay.
John Collins, CJ McCollum, Zion, Bledsoe, Whiteside, Van Fleet, Conley, Ball, Morant, Bryant, Valanciunas, LeVert.
I mean, I would take him before. I would take him fourth in that list, right? Who was the third name?
John Collins, McCollum, Zion.
Yeah, I think I'd take him after Zion. That's I would take Bledsoe. Zion and CJ over John Collins, but
yeah. Well,
that's just because Zion and CJ are way cool.
Yeah, way cool. But yes,
I mean, 50, Michael Porter Jr. is also super young, and in a dynasty league, he's one of the hottest commodities.
Yes. Yeah, and I think he has arrived. He has been what we expected, what we thought he would be out of the draft. That injuries prevented, but now injuries are no longer seemingly a factor. So I think at top 50, I think he is going to be a fantasy stud in 2021. Natty, before we get to your other guys, let us take a quick advertisement hiatus. Showing off my vocabulary there.
Nice job. Erudite.
All right, Natty, who's a guy for 2021 that you think really helped their value in the bubble?
Okay, well, I want to start off with our boyfriend. How do you think Melo affected his value?
If Melo stays with the Portland Trailblazers, your boy drafted him 101.
Oh, for sure.
Except for the fact that I don't actually need to draft him because he's on my dynasty league, and you bet your sorry little bottom that I'm going to be keeping him for final next year. Yeah, I think regardless of whether or not he's with the Trailblazers, he certainly proved that there's a lot of basketball still in him, and that I think that there's a lot of basketball still in him, but I also think that he needs to be in a team that's going to know how to use him and be smart about him, right? Like he tried to go to the Rockets, and the Rockets were like, shoot threes, you're out. And Melo was like, okay, I won't play basketball. But with the Trailblazers, he just meshed beautifully there. And I really don't think that he's going to go anywhere other than the Trailblazers. Do you?
I hope not. I think it was beautiful there. I think his job will be a little bit easier next year, depending on what Portland is able to do. I also just want to underline the fact that Melo was thrown under several dozen buses by the Houston Rockets.
Yep.
Because everybody else was hurt or playing shitty or was just cold, like that still really fucking bothers me. That was so disrespectful. That losing streak was not his fault. But it seems like he found a home in Portland. It seems like he came halfway and the Blazers went halfway. Like Melo changed his profile. He still played like Melo, but he was trying harder on defense. He knew that he wasn't the first or even second option. He wasn't hunting shots. He was trying to let the game come to him. He was trying to get, more ball movement going on. I just thought that it was such a dynamic pairing. I really, really hope he stays there. I mean, I would draft him in the top 100.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, both of us are notorious Melo lovers, but yes.
Right. You're not drafting him to be a 20 points per game guy, but you are drafting him for 15 points, 7 rebounds maybe on a luck. And he also has a really high ceiling. Sometimes you'll get, who knows, like a 30-point game.
For those at home, Melo bubble stats, 34 minutes per game, 16.5 points. 6.9 rebounds. Nice. 0.8 assists. 1.6 stocks per game.
That's
You'll
nice.
love to see it. 46% from 3.
Great.
Yeah. Sign me up for year whatever of Carmelo Anthony.
It would be interesting to see. Wait, can you put Duncan Robinson's numbers next to his? They can't, because Duncan doesn't get dimes, does he?
Let's bring up Duncan Robinson's. Which would you like, the full season or his bubble stats?
Oh yeah, his bubble stats are probably bad, but whatever. I think
full
those
season,
players could be like
full season, 13 points, 3.2 boards, 1.4 assists, shooting 46% from 3. I mean, Duncan Robinson is a 3-point shooter, and that's about it.
And he's young. I mean, like, there's just so much that can change with these guys, but it also seems like Melo changed a little bit too, and I think that's a good thing. He's definitely going to get drafted. I mean, he's going to be in the NBA next year.
Yes.
He 100%. Better fucking be.
Otherwise, Natty is coming and banging on the door of Adam Silver's office and saying, "You just assign him to a team. Forcibly put him on a team, please."
The team that was so desperate that they signed him ended up being happy that they had. And if Houston had kept him rather than unceremoniously booting him out, they would have been happy too. Whatever.
Yep.
It's fine.
We've moved on.
Totally. All right, let's talk about TJ Warren.
Yes, I actually want to talk about him. So you start us off, because I am you go ahead and start.
So TJ Warren had a good fantasy regular season.
Yes.
He was top 60, maybe top 50, depending on your league. But holy shit, did he end up wowing everybody in the bubble. It is a little bit scary to think of the Pacers with a full-strength Depot, a full-strength Brogdon, and a full-strength TJ Warren. Like, if that's the real TJ Warren, and they just have a dynamite 3-and-D wing who can carry your offense some nights if he has to, then the Sabonis and Miles Turner question doesn't even, like, get rid of both of them. Who cares?
Right.
Just get dudes that complement your 3 perimeter players.
And so that's the question to me. Is this the real TJ Warren? TJ Warren averaged 31 points per game in the bubble, shot 52% from 3, 57% from the field with 21 field goal attempts. Like, those numbers I will say fairly comfortably won't translate into 2021. But how much are we going to see that as opposed to his regular season in which he was, let me quickly bring it up, 18 points per game, 37% from three, 52% from the field. Like, still very good. Are we going to see, like, is he going to be a 24-point scorer and night in, night out?
I don't think that that's crazy. Like, he was a player on Phoenix that everyone
God,
kept
Phoenix,
wanting.
why did you get rid of him?
Because they just, sometimes players just don't click with the rest of your personnel, like you.
Fair.
But having said that, in Phoenix, he shot less than 30% from three 2 seasons in a row. Then in 2018-19, he's back above 40. But like that's a little tough. And then he got injured. I think that there are reasons. I don't think they're good ones, but I think there are reasons. But
yes,
man, with Indiana, like 40% from three, and he just seemed like he turned into the player that people wanted him to turn into when Phoenix had drafted him. Like, he sort of slowly, quietly built up his resume, even though it doesn't really show in the numbers, but he got better as a player. And now, if you're in a good situation with a good coach, although I guess they got rid of Nate McMillan and they might get D'Antoni.
Nailed it.
But he really worked with Brogdon. I don't see why, like, a full strength Depot can only improve things. I am a believer. He's 26 years old. He'll be 27 coming into the next season, just entering his prime. He can get better on defense. He can get better and smarter as an experienced veteran player.
You're in.
I guess I'm so in. Like, I could almost see him being, like, not an elite player, but one of the feared perimeter players in the NBA. Like, if he were on one of the coastal teams, maybe you'd hear about him more.
All right. I that's all I needed to hear, because you're right. Like, TJ Warren, I had him on my fantasy team for this year, and he was a very solid, above average fantasy starter for you.
Totally.
Great.
And when did you draft him?
I drafted him. Well, so this was our dynasty league. So I think I might have just added him. I might as well just snagged him off waivers.
Yeah, that's how low. I mean, like, shooting under 30% from three 2 years in a row is rough.
And then he came into the bubble, went absolutely just bonkers, was the story of those bubble 8 games. And so I'm just, I like your confidence in him. I was curious to see whether or not it's like, is he going to maybe be now a 20-point scorer despite being a 30-point scorer throughout the bubble? But if you think he's going to be closer to that 24, maybe even 25, then I like it. How early would you feel comfortable taking TJ Warren?
Here's the rub. If the Pacers don't get rid of any of their players, any of their starting five, so Brogdon, Depot, TJ, Domantas Sabonis, and Miles Turner, then I'm not sure that TJ Warren's value will really be given the best opportunity, because like Sabonis is going to have to score 20 points. Depot's going to need his shots. Brogdon's going to need his points. Right. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, TJ, you're the fourth dude. Like, we passed you when we can't find something else. Thing. Yeah. So like, if I'm the Pacers, I think I'm getting rid of Sabonis and Turner and just trying to get sort of cheaper front court guys and trying to get another perimeter defender to help. Because that team, it's going to be a playoff team. The Pacers are always going to be a playoff team as long as they have at least 3 of those players, I think.
Okay. I like it. Okay, my final guy who I think made a nice little name for himself in the bubble. And as a guy, so Tyler Hero, Michael Porter Jr., I feel like, and the guys who we talked about, Don Mitch, TJ Warren, those guys are all... those were like the names of the bubbles, rightfully so. Like, we needed to talk about them. You can't talk about who boosted their 2021 fantasy stock without talking about those guys.
Right. And we could mention Joker since he was great, but it's like he ended up as the best player in some fantasy leagues. So
that was my little tease, my little question to end the show.
Or sorry, Big Honey.
Is Big Honey first overall? Is that crazy now?
No, it's going to be Anthony Davis, I think.
I know, but like, did Big Money do enough in the bubble where if you saw him go first overall, you'd be like, yeah, okay, I don't hate you for that.
I don't hate you for that, but I guess I would ask why you think that he's a safer bet than AD, because like AD only has LeBron, whereas Jokic has several other players that can, have big nights, and hopefully we'll have another one. So, I mean, we were just talking about Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray.
It's true.
I don't think Jokic needs to score as much for his team to win as Anthony Davis does. So that's why I would take the Brow 1.
All right. Well, that was a fun little interlude. But that's not who I'm talking about.
But triple doubles, if that's a stat in your league, then Joker has to go 1.
Guy who I'm talking about, who also, man, I am just like connecting all of our little loves, also on the Portland Trailblazers. Gary Trent. Gary Trent came Jr. in, was an absolute fire in the bubble.
I shot 50% when you told me this.
50% from 3. I mean, come on. How can we not talk about Gary Trent Jr.?
Who doesn't remember that game? We all watched it.
Oh, incredible. 20.9 minutes per game, 8.5 points, 42% from 3, 1.7 rebounds, 1.0 assists. That was during the season. In the bubble, 34 minutes, 16.9 points, 50% from 3, 1.5 rebounds, and 1.4 assists. Almost had 8.5 attempts, 3-point attempts per game in the bubble. The thing that I also really like, though, is his defense was locked in. That was like kind of like what showed in the bubble. 1.5 stocks per game in the bubble. Love that. Yeah. And he's not going to shoot 50% in 2021, unless he's just about to like blow all of our minds and preconceived notions about what an elite 3-point shooter looks like. But he is like, what do we say, Natty? What is our favorite kind of player in fantasy for us? It is a 3-point shooter who gets you defense. Like that is just money. And I think that's what Gary Trent could be in 2021 as a guy who's likely not going to cost you all of that much. I think he will still be a top 100 player in drafts, but he could give you upside that will vastly outweigh what you had to eventually draft him as.
So I laughed when you said this was going to be one of your dudes on our Slack, because I thought I had similar feelings about Gary Trent Jr. as I did about another Gary, who is also a big-ass fantasy boyfriend on this show, Golden Gary.
Golden Gary.
Because Golden Gary ended up having a good bubble. He ended up looking healthy. He ended up looking like he shook the rust off. He ended up looking like, cool, this is the guy from a couple years ago, and maybe now the sky's the limit, except you're on a team where they don't need that. So I'm sort of wondering with Gary Trent Jr., is he supposed to be on the Trailblazers? Like, could he be more useful and play more somewhere else? Is there...
I think there's...
Because when you play behind CJ and Dame, you're just sort of like waiting for them not to be able to score.
Right. I certainly think that he could be more productive elsewhere.
But if he fits there, then it's great. Like, he looked like the answer to the Trailblazers' prayers for a couple of games. Like, shit, a perimeter player is playing defense. Like, he really, really helped them. I don't know if it's sustainable. He's 6'5", he's 21, he's a dude that he's a second round pick. But here's the thing,
tearing me apart.
But he showed it. Like he showed it. Mm-hmm. Like, what else do you want? Like, maybe it was just a good 3-week stretch, but sometimes 3-week stretches are all you need to actually get a chance. He's an unheralded player. Portland was desperate. Maybe the context is the red flag, but a guy that can play defense for you who is young and maybe can develop his shot even more and play smarter and better. Like, you want efficient utility guys. It's sort of like baseball. You want dudes that can do a lot of things and not do any of them stupidly.
Yep.
Like
That
OG
is
Anunoby, you know, like you want dudes, you want perimeter defenders who aren't going to fuck up your team. I know that seems crazy, but so many teams, you know, like
No, it's you're 100% right, and it just shouldn't be. It shouldn't like come as a surprise to people that like that's how you build a good team. And yet people are shocked that that's how you build a good team.
like Orlando hasn't had a real point guard in so long, and maybe Fultz is that guy, and that would be great. But it's like
Fingers
that's a
crossed.
really
I would
fixable
we
problem that Orlando had
Yeah.
forever. And you're like, what's wrong with you? Like, there's point guards everywhere, and you know, Lonzo,
Just
he's
try.
a perimeter play. Dude, you can get like Darren Collison would have been better than most, and I think he was on the Magic for his whatever. There's some
Natty's
teams
words
just
of-
don't know how to do that.
Natty's
and
words
it's-
of wisdoms to teams: just fucking try.
Dude, if we wanted to do an anti-value, like, I mean, Jonathan Isaac would be at the top of the list,
Oh,
right?
God,
That sucks
yeah.
so
That sucks
fucking
so fucking
hard.
hard.
There's so many players that aren't playing. Like, there's
Oh,
just so many
God.
players that aren't even playing, and it's really depressing to think about it. But whatever. I mean, for baseball, David Price opted out. Like, he'd be on a run to the World Series. But anyway, speaking of perimeter players that maybe fuck up their teams, like Lonzo
Yes.
doesn't need to be in New Orleans. Like, that's a guy that should get traded. He's only going to get in the way because you're going to be concerned about his development too. So it's
Right.
like, I'd rather focus on Zion and the future MVP, Mr. Brandon Ingram, because that's just going to make it easier for the team to congeal around that. You know,
Mhm.
like Lonzo is expendable to me. I don't care about his defense and his developing shot, if that's even true.
Hot take.
But I do think that Gary Harris and Gary Trent Jr. and a bunch of like under 25 dudes who maybe needed a couple of years to learn the NBA because they only spent a few years in college, and college is a different game. Like, maybe these dudes, because of their conditioning and because the game has changed, maybe they now are way more important than they used to be. And I think you're right. Gary Trent Jr. showed that he can play basketball at a high level in a pressure situation. It's more than the fucking Bulls have done.
Wrap us up. Give us a final player who boosted their 2021 fantasy value for you.
This is sad, but
Oh.
I think it's Dragic. But now that he is plantar, like, I don't even know. That's a really painful thing to have.
It's a hard thing to come back from. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's chronic. Like, he looked so fucking sick. He just
Yeah.
looked like everything that the Heat had wanted when they traded 2 first-round draft picks for him.
Mhm.
And just a perfect compliment to Jimmy. He could be out there when Jimmy was sitting. You know, they could spell each other, so you always have one of them on the floor. And then this happened, and it just sucks so bad. And now I don't really, like, did Chris Middleton change his value? Maybe. I mean, Pascal and Bam were already high. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, a guy like Fred VanVleet, if he went to a team where he had a bigger role, then sure, his value goes up. But, like, that's not really because of, like, his
The
play in the
bubble.
bubble or the playoff.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Tatum looked better. Jalen looked better. Smart looked better. Kemba went down. I don't know
Yeah.
what Kemba's value is going to be. It's tough to say because there's also like 8 teams that are going to have players that matter in fantasy, but you didn't get to see how they were in Orlando. So it's like,
Right.
we have all these stats for a majority of the league, but then a bunch of the teams with a bunch of fantasy players on people's teams aren't going to enjoy that extra play. So, like Andre Drummond, a player like Andre Drummond, who is now on the Cleveland Cavaliers, is he still a double-double machine? Is he still a good pick for your center? Is he going to give you value? I don't know.
Natty, do you know how you could answer those questions?
How's that, Pete?
make sure you subscribe to the Fake Teams podcast channel. That's how you'll not
Where
only
we
get
will
us,
only be talking about Dre Drum.
we will
going
be talking
forward.
about Andre Drummond for the next 10 episodes. So subscribe, mark your calendars, and prepare for the deep dive of Andre Drummond that you never knew you needed.
Wait, before we go, can I ask,
Yeah.
because we haven't had a fantasy pod in a while and I'm just itching for it, where are you going to draft Steph and Clay?
Good
How
question.
high would and let's put KD in there too. How high would you take any of those guys? Well, you wouldn't take Clay 1. Would you take Steph or KD 1?
I think I would take KD. If of the two, I'd rather take KD 1. God, it's Achilles tear though.
Yeah,
That is
right. And Steph
such a
was healthy
shitty.
at the end of the regular season. They were like,
Right.
hey, don't worry about it.
God, that
Like,
was
it's
such a
fine.
shitty injury. Because I mean,
Dude.
I just
It's so terrible. Think of all the fucking players that we haven't seen play in so long. It's nut. LeBron has to win this playoffs. He's doing it without Steph, without Clay, without Draymond,
Yeah,
without
he
Kevin
has to.
Durant, without
He has
Kyrie
to.
Irving.
he has to.
Come
This
on,
is his one
dude.
shot. You got to fucking win. Fucking win.
Jesus
LeBron.
Christ.
Win
Sorry.
tonight and then just like cruise. Yes, I think all three of those guys I would draft assuming full health. Because I think you can't not, because if you don't, like, this is one of those instances where you are sitting at, if you have, I think other people in your league have the potential to downgrade them because of the injuries, especially Kevin Durant. And if you're sitting there late in the first round and Kevin Durant is available and you pass on him and everything is fine and he's a baller, you're going to like, that's a league winner right there that you just let go because you were like, you just draft him assuming that everything works, everything is healthy. Modern medicine is a fucking miracle and he will be fine. And you ride with it. And maybe you get some safer picks later because you wanted to make sure your roster doesn't get totally tanked. But I don't think you can draft timid.
Yeah, if you have the opportunity to get value for a Kevin Durant pick,
yes,
you have to take it.
Yes.
Like, because
Moral of the
otherwise, what do
story.
you? Yeah. Unless it's something, like if you're a Pelicans fan and you always have been, and it's like, well, it's Kevin Durant and it's Brandon Ingram and it's Zion,
Sure.
then take your dude, man. No one's gonna hate you for
It's
that.
fantasy.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Also, I could see Ingram having a better year than KD, but there are just so many goddamn fucking players that are going. John Wall's coming back. I don't know what his value is.
Now that guy, see, that's one that I would be worried about because John Wall, we haven't seen play in what's felt like a millennia. And you're talking about a guy like Kevin Durant and Steph and Clay. None of those guys, their game, I feel like, can withstand injuries that affect your athletics. I don't know if what John Wall's game looks like if he's not as explosive. Like, is this going to be a Derrick Rose thing where we have to like wait 5 years before he kind of like figures it out again? Or, I mean, that being said, Russell Westbrook, like he recovered fine. So I don't know. We'll see.
Where would you draft future Celtic Boogie Cousins?
Oh my God, don't tempt me. If
Top
Boogie
5?
If Boogie
like
signed
number
up to
1
Celtics,
overall?
he would go 1 overall. God, I love Boogie Cousins.
I'm so curious to see A, which teams are interested, and B, which teams he's interested in.
Yeah.
If I'm Boogie, get me to Dallas as hard as you can. Just get me to Luka as hard as you fucking can.
God, that would be so hot.
Because what else? God. Where is there a better situation for like a youngish big to slowly come back, because you don't want to, I mean, all the injuries for him. So you don't want to have to be dependent on as like a Joel Embiid number 1 option.
Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about Doc Rivers and Philly real quick. What were your thoughts?
Classic.
Yeah, totally. I don't think you don't need to say anything. And now he's saying yeah, of course they work well together. And I know that's what I've been saying too, but it's like they're not the problem. It's everything else.
It's the most panic franchise move is to go get like a known entity at coach and think that that's going to solve your biggest issue, which it's not, because your biggest issue is that Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons don't work well together.
Like, I almost felt like they hired him not for his coaching, but because of his respect level.
Totally. They're like, take us seriously. Take our decision to have these two guys out on the court at the same time seriously, because Doc Rivers said to do it. Like,
Doc is here.
Rivers
like,
just...
he kept the Clippers afloat when the Sterling thing was going on. You know, like, he's worked with stars who didn't like each other before. He knows what's going on. He has, success. He has a chip. I also sort of felt like, on the positive side, the dude with the most 3-1 losses is now the 76ers coach.
Love it.
And I sort of felt like that was simpatico, like,
love it.
And maybe that will end up with success. I hope it does.
Give me all of it. All right. Make sure to subscribe to the Fake Teams podcast wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. That is how you'll not only get us, but also our fantasy baseball and football podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the Long2 podcast. And Natty, talk to you next week.
Stay safe and healthy, buddy. Talk to you next week. Enjoy tonight's game.
You too, my friend.